What happens when two powerhouse women in entertainment clash live on television, and the cameras capture every explosive moment? Today we're diving into one of the most shocking confrontations in daytime TV history, where Jennifer Lopez found herself in a heated exchange with Kelly Clarkson that ended with security being called and J. Lo storming off the set. This isn't just another celebrity feud, this is a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral out of control when egos collide and old wounds are reopened. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really caused this confrontation. Now, let's get into what happened when Jennifer Lopez sat down with Kelly Clarkson for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. The Kelly Clarkson show was buzzing with its usual energy as the production team prepared for what they expected to be a standard celebrity interview. Jennifer Lopez had arrived to promote her latest project, and everything seemed perfectly normal as she took her seat across from Kelly in the brightly lit studio. The audience was excited, the cameras were rolling, and Kelly opened with her characteristic warmth and enthusiasm. "Welcome back to the show, and I am so excited to have the incredible Jennifer Lopez here with us today," Kelly began, her smile genuine and inviting. "You look absolutely stunning, as always, and I know our audience is dying to hear about your new project." Jennifer returned the smile, crossing her legs elegantly and adjusting her designer blazer. "Thank you so much for having me, Kelly. I'm always happy to be here with you and your amazing audience." The first few minutes proceeded exactly as planned. They discussed Jennifer's upcoming film, her recent business ventures, and her thoughts on returning to the entertainment industry. After a brief hiatus, Kelly's questions were thoughtful and engaging, and Jennifer responded with her usual poise and charm. The audience was captivated, and the energy in the studio felt electric in all the right ways. "You know, Jennifer, I have to say, your ability to reinvent yourself time and time again is truly inspiring," Kelly said, leaning forward slightly. "From music to movies to business, you've conquered every field you've entered. But I'm curious, have you ever felt like you had to prove yourself more than your male counterparts in this industry?" Jennifer's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a slight tension appearing around her eyes. "Well, Kelly, I think every woman in this business has faced challenges that men simply don't have to deal with. The scrutiny is different, the expectations are different, and yes, we often have to work twice as hard to get the same recognition." Kelly nodded thoughtfully, but then she made a decision that would change the entire trajectory of the interview. "Speaking of challenges, I remember reading about some of the difficulties you faced early in your career. There were some reports about how you handled certain situations with other artists, and I'm wondering if you've reflected on those experiences differently now." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Jennifer's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. But anyone watching closely could see that something had shifted. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, Kelly. I've always conducted myself professionally throughout my career." Kelly, perhaps sensing she had touched on something sensitive but not fully grasping the magnitude of what she was unleashing, pressed forward. "Oh, I just meant some of the stories that came out about your time working with certain producers and other artists. I read some interviews where people mentioned that you could be quite, well, demanding on set. I thought it might be interesting to get your perspective on how you've evolved as a collaborator over the years." Jennifer's posture stiffened visibly. The warm, media-trained smile that had been present moments before was now replaced by something much colder. "Kelly, I think there might be some confusion here. I've always been a professional, and I've always treated everyone I work with respect. If you're referring to some tabloid gossip or unsubstantiated rumors, I'd prefer not to dignify them." With the response, the audience began to sense the shift in energy, and Kelly, now realizing she might have stepped into dangerous territory, attempted to correct. "Of course, I didn't mean to imply anything negative. I think what I was trying to get at is how you've managed to maintain such incredible standards throughout your career while working with so many different people." But Jennifer wasn't having it. The damage was done, and her years of dealing with media scrutiny had taught her to recognize when someone was trying to set her up, even if unintentionally. "Kelly, let me be very clear about something. I've spent decades building my career, and I've done it by being dedicated, hardworking, and yes, by having high standards. If that makes me demanding in some people's eyes, then so be it. But I won't sit here and allow anyone to paint me as difficult simply because I refuse to accept mediocrity." Kelly's eyes widened slightly as she realized the interview was taking a turn she hadn't anticipated. "Jennifer, I absolutely didn't mean to suggest." Kelly's face went pale as Jennifer's words hung in the air. The accusation that she was trying to create drama hit her like a physical blow, and she could feel the weight of the entire production watching her response. "Jennifer, I want you to know that creating drama was never my intention. I've always admired your work, and I would never deliberately try to make you uncomfortable or put you in a position where you felt attacked." Jennifer's eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward slightly in her chair, then explained to me, "Kelly, why you would bring up vague references to stories about my alleged behavior on sets when that has nothing to do with why I'm here today. You had to know that was going to put me in a defensive position. The audience was now completely transfixed by what they were witnessing. This wasn't scripted drama or manufactured controversy. This was two successful women having a very real and very public disagreement about respect, professionalism, and media responsibility. Kelly took a deep breath, clearly trying to gather her thoughts and find a way to de-escalate the situation. You're absolutely right, and I take full responsibility for that. I think I was trying to ask a broader question about the challenges women face in the industry, and I did it in a way that was clumsy and inappropriate. I should have been more direct and respectful in how I approached the topic. Jennifer studied Kelly's face for a moment, as if trying to determine whether the apology was genuine or simply damage control. Kelly, I appreciate that you're acknowledging your mistake, but I need you to understand something. When you're a woman in this industry, especially a woman of color, every interview becomes a potential minefield. You're constantly having to prove that you're not the diva that the media wants to portray you as, that you're not difficult, that you're not demanding in ways that would be celebrated if you were a man. Kelly nodded earnestly, and for the first time since the confrontation began, she seemed to be genuinely engaging with what Jennifer was saying rather than just trying to manage the situation. I hear you, and I think that's exactly the conversation we should be having. I should have approached it from that angle instead of referencing specific stories or rumors. But you didn't, Jennifer continued, her voice still carrying an edge of frustration. Instead, you chose to bring up gossip and present it as if it were fact. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is? To constantly have to defend yourself against stories that are either completely false or so distorted that they bear no resemblance to reality. The studio was so quiet that you could hear the hum of the cameras and the air conditioning. Kelly was clearly struggling with how to respond, caught between her desire to apologize and her professional instinct to keep the interview moving forward. Jennifer, I think you're giving voice to something that a lot of women in entertainment experience, and I'm sorry that I contributed to that burden today. Can you help me understand what it's like to navigate those challenges while still maintaining your artistic integrity? Jennifer paused, and for a moment, it seemed like she might be willing to pivot the conversation towards something more constructive, but then her expression hardened again, and it became clear that she wasn't ready to let Kelly off the hook quite yet. Kelly, I don't think you get to ask me that question now. You don't get to create a problem and then ask me to solve it for you on national television. If you wanted to have a meaningful conversation about the challenges women face in this industry, you should have approached it with respect and preparation, not by ambushing me with references to tabloid stories. Kelly's composure was beginning to crack under the pressure. She had built her career on being warm, approachable, and relatable, and now she was being called out publicly for what Jennifer saw as a betrayal of those very qualities. I understand why you're upset, and I don't blame you for feeling ambushed. That wasn't my intention, but I recognize that impact matters more than intention. Does it? Jennifer challenged, her voice rising slightly. Because if impact truly mattered more than intention, wouldn't you have done your homework before bringing up sensitive topics? Wouldn't you have considered how your questions might affect your guest before you asked them? The confrontation was now reaching a fever pitch, and Kelly was clearly struggling to maintain any semblance of control over the interview. Jennifer, you're absolutely right, and I take full responsibility for not handling this properly. I should have been more thoughtful in my approach. But you weren't, Jennifer shot back. And now you're asking me to educate you about the very thing you should have understood before you invited me here. Do you see how that puts me in an impossible position? Either I answer your questions and do the emotional labor of explaining why your approach was problematic, or I refuse to engage and get labeled as difficult or uncooperative. Kelly's eyes were beginning to well up with tears, though she was fighting hard to maintain her composure. I never wanted to put you in that position. Jennifer, I have so much respect for you, and I'm horrified that I've made you feel this way. Then why did you do it? Jennifer demanded, her voice now carrying a tone of genuine hurt beneath the anger. Why did you choose to go down this path when you could have simply asked me about my work, my process, my upcoming projects? What did you hope to accomplish by bringing up old rumors and gossip? Kelly opened her mouth to respond, but Jennifer wasn't finished. I'll tell you what I think happened here, Kelly. I think someone on your production team thought it would be interesting to get me to respond to old stories, maybe get a soundbite that could be used in promos or social media clips. I think this was a calculated decision to try to create a moment at my expense. That's not true, Kelly protested, her voice cracking slightly. I would never allow my team to do that, and I would never knowingly try to exploit a guest for ratings or social media content. Jennifer's expression was skeptical. Then explain to me how those questions made it into your notes. Kelly, explain to me how you decided that asking me about my alleged behavior on sets was more important than asking me about my actual work. The studio audience was now completely silent, watching what had become less of an interview and more of a public reckoning. Kelly was clearly in over her head, and Jennifer was not backing down from her position that she had been treated unfairly. Jennifer, I prepared those questions myself, and I thought I was approaching them from a... Kelly's face crumpled at Jennifer's words, and she could feel the weight of the entire production hanging in the balance. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of what had become one of the most uncomfortable television interviews in recent memory. Jennifer, please, I'm begging you to give me a chance to make this right. I know I messed up, but I don't want this to end like this. Jennifer shook her head slowly, her decision clearly made. Kelly, some things can't be fixed with apologies. You had an opportunity to treat me with respect and professionalism, and instead, you chose to turn this into something it was never supposed to be. I won't be a part of that. The audience was now shifting uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that they were witnessing something that was about to go very badly. Kelly made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Can we please just take a moment, maybe go to a commercial break, and figure out how to handle this properly? No, Jennifer said firmly, standing up from her chair. I'm done here, Kelly. I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected on national television, and I'm not going to pretend that everything is fine when it's not. Kelly's eyes widened in panic as she realized that Jennifer was actually preparing to leave. Jennifer, please don't go. We can work through this. I know we can find a way to have the conversation you deserve to have. Jennifer was already removing her microphone, her movements sharp and deliberate. The time for that conversation was before you decided to ambush me with gossip and rumors. You had months to prepare for this interview. Kelly, you could have researched my actual work, my actual accomplishments, my actual perspectives on the industry. Instead, you chose to focus on tabloid stories and behind-the-scenes drama. I made a mistake, Kelly pleaded, tears now openly streaming down her face. I made a terrible mistake, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. Jennifer paused in her movements and looked directly at Kelly, her expression a mixture of disappointment and resolve. Kelly, the mistake wasn't just in the questions you asked. The mistake was in thinking that my time, my reputation, and my dignity were acceptable casualties in your quest for an interesting interview. That's not something you can just apologize away. The studio was now in complete chaos. Production assistants were frantically trying to figure out how to handle this situation. Camera operators were looking to their directors for guidance. And the audience was watching in stunned silence as one of the biggest stars in entertainment prepared to walk out of a live television interview. Kelly made one final, desperate attempt to keep Jennifer from leaving. Jennifer, I understand that you're hurt and angry, and you have every right to be, but please, can we find a way to turn this into something positive? Can we use this moment to have the real conversation about the challenges women face in this industry? Jennifer turned back to face Kelly, and when she spoke, her voice was filled with a quiet fury that was somehow more powerful than any shouting could have been. Kelly, you don't get to create a problem and then ask me to help you solve it for your television show. You don't get to hurt someone and then expect them to participate in your redemption arc. That's not how this works. But we could help other women by talking about this, Kelly insisted, grasping at straws. We could turn this into something meaningful, something that could make a difference. Jennifer's laugh was bitter and humorless. Oh, now you want to help other women. Where was that concern when you were preparing questions designed to validate gossip about my professional behavior? Where was that concern when you decided to use my appearance on your show as an opportunity to create controversy? Kelly was now openly sobbing, her carefully constructed television persona completely shattered. I never wanted to hurt you, Jennifer. I swear to you, that was never my intention. But you did hurt me, Jennifer replied, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. You invited me here under false pretenses. You ambushed me with inappropriate questions, and then you expected me to just smile and go along with it because that's what good guests do. Well, I'm not going to be a good guest if being a good guest means allowing myself to be disrespected. The confrontation had now reached its breaking point. Jennifer had made her decision, and nothing Kelly could say was going to change her mind. She picked up her purse and began walking toward the exit, leaving Kelly sitting alone at the interview table, tears streaming down her face. Jennifer, please, Kelly called after her, her voice breaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Jennifer paused at the edge of the set and turned back one final time. Kelly, I hope you learned something from this. I hope you learned that your guests are human beings with feelings and dignity, not just content to be exploited for ratings. I hope you learn that there are consequences when you treat people poorly, even if you didn't mean to. And with that, Jennifer Lopez walked off the set of the Kelly Clarkson show, leaving behind a stunned audience, a devastated host, and a production team scrambling to figure out how to handle one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. Kelly sat alone at her desk, still crying, as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of her emotional breakdown, and she seemed completely unaware of anything except the magnitude of her failure. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the camera, though it was unclear whether she was talking to Jennifer, to her audience, or to herself. "I'm so sorry." The studio audience didn't know whether to applaud, to console Kelly, or to simply sit in stunned silence. They had come expecting a typical celebrity interview, and instead they had witnessed something raw, real, and utterly devastating. Production assistants were now moving on to the set, trying to figure out how to transition to a commercial break, or end the show entirely. The carefully orchestrated world of daytime television had been shattered by a moment of genuine human emotion and conflict. As Kelly continued to sit at her desk, trying to compose herself, it became clear that this interview would be remembered not for anything Jennifer Lopez had come to promote, but for the moment when two successful women collided over issues of respect, professionalism, and the treatment of guests in the media. The cameras finally stopped rolling, but the impact of what had just happened would continue to reverberate through the entertainment industry for years to come. Jennifer Lopez had made her point in the most dramatic way possible, and Kelly Clarkson was left to pick up the pieces of what had become one of the most controversial moments in her career. So what do you think really caused this explosive confrontation? Was Jennifer right to walk out, or should she have stayed to work things out with Kelly? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories from the world of entertainment. Did Kelly's questions cross the line, or was this all just a misunderstanding that got out of control?